The galaxy was ancient, full of civilizations that had risen and fallen like waves on an endless sea. Yet among those countless stars, one young race had just begun to stretch its wings: humanity. To some alien empires, humans were fascinating. They were bold explorers, reckless but creative, capable of adapting faster than most species could comprehend. To others, they were insignificant, a fragile species from a blue planet on the edge of the galaxy. But to the Zeroth Dominion, humanity was something else entirely. The Zeroth were proud, cruel, and old. They had ruled for millennia, enslaving weaker species, conquering entire star systems, and crushing rebellions before they could even breathe. To them, humanity looked like easy prey, an upstart species daring to leave its cradle, daring to claim new stars. The Dominion had no intention of letting such a species grow unchecked, and so, without warning, the Zeroth declared war. The first strike came fast and merciless. Their fleets appeared above Mars and the colonies of Europa like shadows blotting out the stars. Enormous warships, larger than cities, unleashed fire upon fragile human outposts. Mars burned. The domes that sheltered its cities shattered under orbital bombardment. Families ran through collapsing tunnels, their voices drowned out by the roar of destruction. The surface glowed red not from the planet's soil, but from the rivers of flame that consumed human lives. On Europa, oceans boiled as the Zeroth unleashed weapons designed not just to kill, but to terrify. Waves of steam rose into the frozen skies as habitats cracked and drowned. Children pressed against viewports, crying for parents who could not save them. Earth watched in horror as reports streamed in. News broadcasts showed broken colonies, desperate survivors, and skies filled with falling ships. For the first time in centuries, all of humanity felt the same pain. The Zeroth called it a demonstration of dominance. They wanted to send a message, submit or be erased, but what they failed to understand was the nature of humanity's spirit. On Earth, grief was overwhelming. Billions mourned, entire nations falling silent as names of the dead were read aloud. But within that grief burned something far stronger: anger, in the hearts of parents who had lost children, in the eyes of children who had lost parents, in the voices of leaders who stood before their people and promised justice. The Zeroth had expected humanity to break, to surrender, to accept their place as another conquered species. Instead, something remarkable began to happen. For the first time in human history, the divisions that had always split Earth, politics, borders, and old grudges, suddenly seemed meaningless. It did not matter what language someone spoke, what flag they carried, or what history they bore. They were all human. And humanity was under attack. In the silence that followed the destruction of Mars and Europa, a promise began to grow. It was whispered in homes, shouted in military barracks, and carried in the hearts of the grieving. The promise was simple: humanity would not forgive. Humanity would not forget. The Zeroth had declared war on Earth, and Earth would answer. Even as smoke still rose from broken colonies, ships in Earth's orbit began to mobilize. Factories that once built cars and planes were converted to build weapons and warships. Engineers, scientists, and soldiers stood together, working not as individuals of nations, but as brothers and sisters of one species. Children who had cried in fear now grew up swearing they would fight. Mothers and fathers who had buried their families put on uniforms and carried rifles. Leaders who had once debated endlessly now spoke with one voice. The galaxy had seen wars before. Empires had fought for power, wealth, and pride. But this war would be different, because humanity was not fighting for conquest. Humanity was fighting for survival. And when a species fights for survival, when it has nothing left to lose, there is nothing more dangerous in all the stars. The Zeroth Dominion believed they had struck fear into human hearts. What they had actually done was awaken a fire unlike anything they had ever faced. Humanity grieved. Humanity bled, but humanity also rose. And so began a war that would shake the galaxy. Earth was quiet in the days after the first attacks. It was not the silence of peace, but the silence of grief. Billions of humans had watched their colonies burn, their friends and family lost in the fire of an enemy they had never truly known. In homes across every nation, people lit candles, prayed, and wept. Names of the fallen were read aloud on every screen. From the cities of Asia to the plains of Africa, from the coasts of Europe to the deserts of America, humanity mourned as one, But grief did not remain grief for long. It changed. It hardened. On the floor of the United Nations, leaders stood side by side. Once, their speeches had been filled with rivalry, pride, and disagreement. Now, their voices carried only one truth. Humanity must stand together. Old enemies shook hands. Ancient grudges were put aside. Borders, which had divided people for centuries, began to fade into meaninglessness. For the first time in history, humanity felt like a single family, a family under attack. Factories that had once built cars and tools turned to building weapons. Shipyards in orbit worked day and night, their frames glowing like fireflies above the planet. Engineers, once concerned with trade ships and science vessels, now worked on war machines that could challenge the Dominion's fleets. But it was not only governments and armies that changed. Ordinary people too rose to meet the moment. A farmer from India left his fields and volunteered to serve. A teacher in Brazil gave her students lessons in courage, telling them stories of heroes past so they would never give in to despair. A child in Nigeria who had watched the news of Mars swore to one day join the fleet and fight among the stars. The pain of loss was everywhere, but so too was the fire of determination. On the moon, miners worked without rest, pulling resources from its surface to feed the factories of Earth. On Mars, survivors of the attack rebuilt underground shelters, vowing never to abandon their world again. On Earth itself, the skies were filled with streaks of fire as rockets carried supplies and soldiers into orbit. Humanity was changing. The wounds were deep, but the spirit was stronger, and the Zeroth Dominion watched with arrogance, still believing that humans were nothing more than stubborn prey. They thought Earth's unity was a momentary reaction, a flame that would burn out as quickly as it had been lit. They did not understand. Humanity was not uniting out of convenience. Humanity was uniting out of survival, out of love for their children, out of rage for their dead, out of the promise that no more human lives would be lost without a fight. A single phrase began to spread across the planet, repeated in whispers, in songs, in speeches. It became more than words, it became a vow. They declared war on Earth. We will declare the end of their civilization. Soldiers carved it into their armor. Pilots painted it on the sides of their ships. Families wrote it above their doorways, a reminder that their suffering would not be forgotten. And so the work continued. Every city became a forge. Every worker became part of the great machine of survival. Every scientist searched for ways to turn human creativity into weapons sharp enough to cut down an empire. The galaxy had never seen such a transformation. A species once divided by borders, languages, and politics was now bound by one unshakable truth. Humanity was one, and in that unity, there was strength. The Zeroth Dominion had wanted to break humanity. Instead, they had created something far more dangerous. They had created a people who would no longer bow, a species that would no longer be prey, a civilization that had been wounded, but not destroyed. From the ashes of Mars and the oceans of Europa, from the tears of Earth and the fire of its skies, humanity rose, not as a collection of nations, not as scattered colonies, but as one people with one voice, one cause, and one destiny. The Zeroth had started a war, but humanity would finish it. Humanity's unity gave them strength, but strength alone was not enough. The Zeroth Dominion had fleets older than human civilization itself. Their warships were massive, armed with plasma cannons that could slice through steel like paper. Their shields shimmered with ancient energy fields no human weapon could pierce. If humanity wanted to survive, they had to learn. And they had to learn fast. The first breakthrough came from the wreckage. After the first battles, shattered Zeroth ships floated like broken bones in space. Risking their lives, human salvagers rushed into the debris fields before the Dominion could destroy the remains. What they brought back changed everything. Alien engines, weapons, and shield generators were dragged into secret labs across Earth, Mars, and the Moon. Scientists stared at the technology with awe. It was far beyond anything humanity had ever built. Yet within weeks, the first sparks of understanding began to appear. Humans did not copy. They improved. The Dominion's plasma cannons became the foundation for human railguns, faster and sharper, striking with deadly precision. Their clumsy shield generators were rebuilt with human creativity, made smaller, lighter, and more efficient. Even their warp drives, once thought impossible to understand, were dissected and rebuilt to carry human ships farther and faster than ever before. The Zeroth had centuries of experience, but humanity had something just as powerful: adaptability. They did not fight like the Dominion. The Zeroth moved their fleets in slow, heavy formations bound by rigid rules of war. They fought with arrogance, believing brute strength would always crush the enemy. Humans fought differently. They fought like wolves. Instead of meeting the enemy head-on, they struck from the shadows. Small strike fleets darted in and out of battle, targeting supply lines and crippling fuel depots. Drones swarmed Dominion ships, overwhelming them with sheer numbers. Human commanders used trickery and misdirection, turning every battle into a puzzle the Zeroth could not solve. For the first time, the Dominion felt confusion. For the first time, they began to lose. On Earth, people whispered with hope. Each captured ship, each salvaged weapon was proof that humanity could stand against giants. Each victory, no matter how small, was a spark in the darkness, yet the cost was high. Every success came with loss. Human fleets returned from raids missing half their crews. Survivors carried haunted eyes, speaking of friends who had sacrificed themselves so others could live. Humanity was learning, yes, but the lessons were written in blood still. The promise remained. They declared war on Earth. We will declare the end of their civilization. The phrase grew louder now, carried like a prayer through the stars. It was spoken in the training halls of soldiers, in the quiet corners of homes, and in the steel corridors of ships heading into battle. Humanity had something the Zeroth could never understand: heart. They were not fighting for conquest or for power. They were fighting for each other, for their families, for their children, and slowly the balance began to shift. In the halls of the Zeroth Council, worry spread like a shadow. Reports spoke of human ambushes destroying convoys. Entire Dominion outposts had gone silent. A fleet of Zeroth warships, once thought invincible, had been forced to retreat after being surrounded by smaller, faster human vessels. The Dominion's arrogance began to crack. They had expected prey. What they had found was a predator learning how to hunt, and the galaxy watched. Other species, long oppressed by the Dominion, whispered in secret. Could it be possible? Could the humans truly stand against the ancient masters of war? For humanity, there was no question. They would fight. They would endure. They would learn, and when the time came, they would win. The war had dragged on for years, and humanity had paid a heavy price. Entire fleets had been lost, and colonies had been erased from the stars. Yet with every loss, humanity grew sharper, stronger, and more dangerous. Now the time had come for their first true test, a battle that would decide if humanity could truly stand as an equal against the Zeroth Dominion. The target was Vega 9, a mining colony rich in rare metals. It had once been a human world, but the Zeroth had taken it in their first strikes, turning it into a fortress. From Vega 9, the Dominion supplied their fleets with the resources needed to fuel their war. To lose it would cripple them. The human fleet that gathered for the assault was smaller, outnumbered nearly 3-1. The Dominion's warships waited like predators in the dark, confident that no human force could ever defeat them. But humanity had a new way of fighting. When the fleets clashed, the void filled with fire. Dominion battleships advanced in heavy lines, unleashing storms of plasma. Their cannons lit up space, tearing through the shields of human ships. But this time, humanity did not meet them head-on. They struck like shadows. Small strike groups broke away from the main fleet, darting between asteroids and debris. Swarms of drones rushed forward, overwhelming the Dominion's point defenses. Human railguns cracked through the dark, each shot carrying enough force to pierce the armor of ships 10 times their size. Where the Zeroth expected an orderly fight, they found chaos. Where they expected fear, they found fury. A Dominion flagship turned its cannons on a cluster of human frigates, only to find itself surrounded by smaller vessels weaving in and out of its blind spots. Its shields collapsed under the rain of human fire, and moments later the ship exploded, its wreckage scattering across the stars. For the first time in centuries, a Dominion flagship had fallen in open battle. On Earth, billions watched the live feed. When the flagship erupted into flame, cheers erupted in cities and towns alike. It was not just a military victory, it was proof that humanity could win. But the battle was not yet over. The Dominion still had numbers, and their fury grew with every loss. They pressed harder, determined to crush the humans before the unthinkable happened. Yet humanity's spirit did not break. On the bridge of the warship Vengeance, Admiral Rana Patel stood tall. Her voice carried calm strength as she directed her fleet like a conductor leading a symphony of fire. Every trap, every maneuver, every sacrifice fell into place. And then came the final move. Hidden among the debris fields, human engineers had placed a network of orbital mines. At Admiral Patel's command, the mines detonated all at once. Explosions ripped through the Dominion fleet, tearing apart ships from within. The battle was decided. Vega 9 belonged to humanity again. When the smoke cleared and the silence of victory filled the stars, survivors of the colony emerged from their hiding places. They wept as they saw the human banners once again raised above their world. Soldiers embraced one another, tears mixing with cheers. For the first time in the war, humanity had taken back what was theirs, and the galaxy trembled. For centuries, the Zeroth Dominion had crushed rebellions with ease. No species had ever struck back and won, but now a young race from a blue world had done the impossible. The victory at Vega 9 was more than a battle won. It was a message one carried across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Humanity could not be broken. Humanity could fight. Humanity could win. And in the heart of every human, hope burned brighter than ever before. The Zeroth had declared war on Earth, but Earth had just declared war back. The victory at Vega 9 lit a fire in humanity's heart. For the first time, the galaxy believed the impossible, that humans could stand against the mighty Zeroth Dominion. Across Earth and its colonies, people celebrated, holding on to hope like never before. But victory never comes without cost. The fleets that returned from Vega 9 were not the same as those that had left. Ships limped home with scars burned into their hulls. Some vessels never returned at all, their crews now names on endless lists of the fallen. Every family had someone missing. On Earth, the cheers of celebration mixed with tears of mourning. Mothers held photographs of sons and daughters who would never come back. Children waited at spaceports for fathers who had given their lives in the void. Lovers stood by silent graves, whispering promises into the wind. The people of Earth had won. Yes, but they had also paid in blood. Admiral Rana Patel, hero of Vega 9, spent her nights in silence on the bridge of Vengeance. She did not smile at the victory. She thought instead of the faces of the young pilots who had followed her orders into fire and never returned. Their laughter still echoed in her memory, now gone forever. Humanity was learning a painful truth. Every battle, even the ones they won, would take something precious. The Zeroth Dominion understood this as well. Shamed by their defeat at Vega 9, they turned to cruelty. No longer did they only strike fleets and outposts. Now they targeted civilian worlds directly. They rained fire on undefended colonies, hoping to crush humanity's spirit through terror. Entire towns were wiped away in seconds. Hospitals and schools became targets. The Dominion believed that if humanity was shown enough horror, they would surrender. But the opposite happened. Every destroyed colony, every massacre, every broken home only deepened humanity's resolve. Instead of fear, there was fury. Instead of surrender, there was unity. In the ruins of a colony on Titan, survivors raised a flag made from torn clothing and painted with blood. We endure. The image spread across Earth, across Mars, across every ship in the fleet. It became a symbol of unbreakable will. Still, the weight of war was heavy. Soldiers aboard warships whispered to each other at night, asking how much more they could endure. Parents worried if their children would grow up knowing only conflict. And yet no one gave in. Humanity had no choice but to continue. To stop fighting would mean extinction. On Earth, workers labored without rest, building ships faster than ever before. Engineers designed weapons that could pierce even the strongest Dominion shields. Scientists pushed the limits of human knowledge, driven not by curiosity but by necessity. But for all the progress, the losses continued. Each victory left graves behind. Each world reclaimed was bought with sacrifice. The galaxy began to see humanity not only as fighters, but as survivors. Unlike the Dominion, who fought for pride, humanity fought for love, for the memory of those who had been lost, and for the children yet to be born. In the darkest nights, humanity clung to one truth: they were not fighting alone. They were fighting for each other. The Dominion could destroy cities. They could burn colonies. They could silence voices, but they could not break the human spirit. And so, even in grief, even in loss, even in endless sacrifice, humanity pressed forward. Their eyes no longer held only sorrow. They carried fire. The Zeroth had thought cruelty would end the war. Instead, it fueled it. Every drop of blood spilled became another reason to fight. Every fallen soldier became another voice in the vow that echoed across the stars. They declared war on Earth. We will declare the end of their civilization. And humanity meant every word. Years passed, and the war carved scars across the stars. Humanity had grown from a desperate race of survivors into a united force feared across the galaxy. Every battle hardened them. Every loss sharpened them. The Zeroth Dominion, once untouchable, now trembled. Their fleets that had once ruled the galaxy were shattered in system after system. Their colonies, built on the bones of conquered worlds, now fell one by one to human hands. And yet humanity was not fighting for conquest. They were fighting for survival, for justice, for the memory of those lost. Now only one target remained: Zeroth Prime, the Dominion's capital, their heart, their throne. It was a world ringed with defenses, a fortress that had stood untouched for centuries. The Zeroth believed it could never fall, but humanity believed otherwise. The largest fleet ever assembled left Earth's orbit. Thousands of warships, each one carrying names of lost worlds, marched across the void. Their hulls bore scars of past battles, but their hearts carried fire. At the head of this armada sailed the pride of humanity, the vengeance of Earth, the most powerful warship ever built by human hands. Inside its command deck, Admiral Rana Patel stood at the center, her face calm but her eyes burning with determination. She had seen too much loss to turn back now. This battle would decide everything, the survival of humanity or its extinction. Across Earth, billions watched. Families gathered around screens, holding hands, whispering prayers. In the silence of spaceports, children stared at the skies, imagining the fleet sailing beyond the stars. Everyone knew the truth. This was the final march. The human fleet entered Zeroth space and the sky erupted. The Dominion had gathered everything they had left. Thousands of ships, massive fortresses, entire armies waited in orbit around their capital. Plasma fire lit the void, turning the darkness into storms of red and blue. The battle began. Human ships darted between the heavy formations of the Zeroth, weaving in and out like wolves tearing at giants. Drones swarmed in clouds, overwhelming the enemy's defenses. Orbital mines exploded like stars, tearing gaps in the Dominion lines. But the Zeroth fought with desperation. They threw ship after ship into the fray, unwilling to surrender their homeworld. The void filled with wreckage, with fire, with the cries of the dying. Admiral Patel's voice echoed across the fleet, calm and steady. Hold the line. Remember why we fight. For Earth, for our children, for those who fell before us. Her words carried strength through the chaos. Soldiers clenched their jaws. Pilots pressed forward. Engineers pushed failing engines to their limits. And slowly, painfully, the tide began to turn. Human ships broke through the first line of defenses, then the second, then the third. For every human vessel lost, 2 Dominion ships burned. For every soldier who fell, more rose to take their place. At last, the fleets reached Zeroth Prime itself. The once proud capital world shuddered under bombardment. Its skies, once filled with gleaming spires and proud towers, now burned with the fire of retribution. The Zeroth Council, who had once laughed at humanity, now cowered in their fortresses, hearing the thunder of human weapons above. Across the galaxy, oppressed species held their breath. Could it truly be? Could the mighty Zeroth Dominion fall? The answer came in fire. Humanity, once thought weak, now stood at the gates of an empire that had ruled for millennia. And they were not knocking. They were breaking them down. This was no longer just a war for survival. It was justice. Humanity had come to finish what the Zeroth had started. The sky above Zeroth Prime burned like the end of the world. Humanity's fleet, battered but unbroken, hung in orbit, a wall of steel and fire. The planet below, once proud and untouchable, trembled under the weight of human resolve. The Zeroth Council, those ancient rulers who had mocked humanity, now faced the reality they had never imagined. Their warships lay in ruins, their armies scattered, their people terrified. For centuries, they had believed themselves invincible. For centuries they had crushed rebellion after rebellion, but now the prey they had scorned had become the hunter. On the bridge of the Vengeance of Earth, Admiral Rana Patel surveyed the battlefield. Her hands rested lightly on the controls, but her mind carried the weight of every loss, every tear, every life that had been taken by the Dominion. She remembered the children of Mars who had screamed as the first bombardments began. She remembered the families on Europa who had drowned beneath the fires of war. She remembered the soldiers who had given their lives at Vega 9, at Titan, at Vega 12, so many names, so many faces all gone, and now at last, humanity had the chance to deliver justice. The fleet moved as one, cutting through the remaining defenses with precision. Dominion warships exploded in showers of sparks, their shields collapsing under the coordinated assault. Human pilots, fueled by grief and determination, pressed forward, refusing to yield. Every strike carried a message, every victory a reminder. Humanity would not forgive. Ground forces followed swiftly. Human troops landed on Zeroth Prime with a resolve that shook the planet. They moved not as conquerors, but as the avengers of countless lives lost. Their banners flew above the Dominion's towers, painted with the scars of war, carrying a single promise across the streets. We remember. The Zeroth Council attempted to flee, but there was nowhere to run. Humanity had cut off every escape route, sealed every path to survival. Their empire, once vast and powerful, was collapsing under the weight of their own arrogance and the fury of the humans they had sought to destroy. And finally, it was over. The last of the Dominion's fleets fell. The final defenders surrendered, or were eliminated. The capital world, the heart of their civilization, lay silent in the void. Smoke rose from shattered spires, and the cries of the once mighty Zeroth were replaced by the quiet strength of survivors, the humans who had endured so much to reach this moment. Across the galaxy, species that had long suffered under the Dominion's rule whispered in disbelief. The unstoppable had been stopped. The powerful had been broken, and it had been done by a race they had once dismissed as fragile, weak, and naive. On the bridge of the Vengeance of Earth, Admiral Patel stood silently, her eyes on the horizon. Humanity had not only survived, they had triumphed, and in that triumph a message was sent across the stars, one that no civilization could ignore. Do not provoke the children of Earth, for if you declare war on them, they will declare the end of your civilization. It was not a threat. It was not arrogance. It was a fact. Humanity had fought with heart, with courage, and with an unbreakable will. They had faced annihilation and transformed it into victory. The survivors of countless battles, the families who had lost everything, the soldiers who had carried hope into the darkest nights, they all knew one truth: humanity was no longer weak. Humanity was a force the galaxy could not ignore. And as the sun rose over the shattered spires of Zeroth Prime, it shone on a new era, one forged in fire, blood, and unyielding determination. Humanity had faced its greatest challenge and emerged not just alive, but victorious. The galaxy had witnessed it. The Zeroth Dominion was no more. And humanity, united, strong, and proud, would never be forgotten.